They were the forgotten ones, the people whose bones tell a story that no one wanted to believe. Long before cities, long before kings or language, when survival meant everything, weakness was a death sentence. And yet, buried deep within caves across Europe and Asia, archaeologists have uncovered a secret, the evidence of how prehistoric humans treated those who were different, fragile, or broken. It began with scattered remains, a bent spine here, a twisted leg there, skeletons of children who should never have lived beyond birth. For decades, these finds were dismissed as accidents of nature. But slowly, as excavation after excavation revealed the same haunting pattern, the truth began to take shape. A truth older and darker than civilization itself. In the Paleolithic world, there was no mercy. Every day was a negotiation with extinction. The strong hunted, the fast fled, the cunning survived. But those born with weakness, blindness, twisted limbs, disease, deformity, became something else entirely. They became burdens, symbols, or sacrifices. Archaeological sites like Shenadar Cave in Iraq and La Chapelle Saints in France show evidence of early compassion, skeletons of disabled individuals who were cared for long after injury. But compassion and cruelty have always been separated by the thinnest possible line. And what some researchers once called care may have been something far more unsettling. In the oldest layers of earth, beneath soot and ash, bones of the infirm tell silent stories. Some show signs of healing, broken limbs that mended slowly, shattered skulls that fused unevenly. But others tell of something darker, deliberate fractures, repetitive incisions, signs of starvation and restraint. For every disabled person who was protected, there may have been another who was used as warning, ritual, or spectacle. Prehistoric societies did not have hospitals or moral codes. Their gods were hunger and weather, and survival demanded order. In such a world, a child born unable to walk was not a miracle, it was a question. Why did nature allow it? What did it mean? And who would dare to keep it alive when food was scarce? Some groups, archaeologists believe, left them to die quietly in the cold. Infanticide was not cruelty, it was logic. The tribe could not afford compassion when winter devoured everything. But other tribes did something stranger. They kept them alive. They carried the weak across mountains, fed them, and buried them with care. At first, it seemed like the birth of empathy, the first sign of humanity's heart. But ancient rituals unearthed near these graves suggest a second, darker reason. They may have believed the disabled were touched by spirits. In Siberian burial mounds dating back more than 25,000 years, archaeologists found skeletons of individuals with severe deformities buried beneath layers of red ochre, the same pigment used for ritual markings and shamanic offerings. Some were laid beside tools they could never have used, weapons too large for their frail bones. These were not symbols of status. They were gifts for the afterlife, or for something else. The evidence suggests a haunting contradiction, that the same people who starved and abandoned the weak also revered them as sacred. The line between cruelty and worship blurred completely. In some tribes, deformity was seen as divine punishment, a mark of impurity to be erased. In others, it was seen as divine favor, a vessel for voices from beyond. Either way, their fate was never their own. In the French Pyrenees, one excavation uncovered a grave of a young boy whose legs were severely twisted, his spine bent almost in half. Around his body were arranged the jawbones of wolves, each placed carefully like guardians. His bones bore cut marks, shallow, deliberate, the kind seen in ritual scarification, not violence. The burial dated to roughly 15,000 years ago. The conclusion disturbed even seasoned anthropologists. He had been turned into a living symbol, both pitied and feared. He had been allowed to live long enough to become sacred, and then sacrificed to keep the world in balance. Such discoveries shattered the comforting narrative that early humans were simply kind. Compassion existed, yes, but it lived alongside terror. To the Stone Age mind, pain and difference were messages from unseen forces. When a child was born blind or crippled, the tribe saw not biology, but omen. In northern Spain, cave walls depict figures with distorted limbs, one arm longer than the other, eyes drawn unevenly. These were not mistakes in drawing. The artists had painted what they believed were sacred deformities, humans merging with spirits. These images appear alongside handprints of children, some showing missing fingers or malformed palms pressed into the stone. Modern researchers once called them ritual amputations. Others now think they may have been real. Fingers lost to frostbite or deliberate cutting, offered to unseen gods in exchange for protection. The boundary between body and belief had vanished. The disabled became living prayers. In Central Europe, excavations revealed small enclosures built from animal bones, filled with human remains that bore no signs of attack. Their bones were soft, malformed, and brittle, victims of disease or genetic disorders. Yet they had been buried with animal skulls facing outward, as if to guard the world from what was inside. To the prehistoric imagination, sickness and deformity were not just physical. They were portals, openings to something beyond reason. Keeping such people alive could invite power, but it could also invite fear. And when that fear grew unbearable, it demanded ritual. The earliest evidence of human sacrifice appears not long after the first evidence of care. One pattern follows the other. It is as if the act of nurturing weakness created guilt, a debt that could only be repaid with death. Across thousands of years, the same pattern repeats. The disabled child is sheltered, marked, honored, then killed in ceremony. The cycle of mercy and horror feeding itself endlessly. In some regions, particularly during the Mesolithic period, graves of deformed individuals are found surrounded by broken tools and burnt bones. These were not grave goods, they were offerings. The tribe burned part of what they owned to accompany the broken body into the afterlife, hoping to contain whatever force had touched it. One anthropologist described it as ritual quarantine. The body was sacred and dangerous, both pitted and feared. Even in death, they were kept separate. The story of disability in prehistoric times is not one of progress. It is a mirror reflecting the contradiction of humanity, the instinct to protect colliding with the terror of the unknown. Those who could not walk were carried, yes, but often carried to the edge of the settlement, where spirits were believed to linger. Those who could not see were fed by hand, but fed last. Those who could not speak were considered vessels, mouths for invisible gods. And when the harvest failed, when disease spread, when predators came too close, those same mouths were silenced first. Some anthropologists once celebrated Shanidar I, the Neanderthal man who survived with a crushed arm, blindness, and partial paralysis, as proof of prehistoric compassion. He had lived for years after his injuries, cared for by his group. But newer interpretations suggest a different possibility, that he was not just tolerated, but displayed. His survival may have served as proof of the group's power, evidence that they could defy nature itself. He became a relic while still breathing. In tribal societies, power often comes from symbols. To keep a crippled man alive in a world of predators was not only charity. It was a message to the universe. We control who lives and dies. And when he finally died, his grave was not shallow. It was ceremonial. His bones were arranged with flowers, pigments, and tools he could never have used. For centuries, that was called empathy. Now some call it theater. As human culture evolved, the patterns deepened. The Bronze Age inherited the superstition of the Stone Age, turning the disabled into omens. Infants born with deformities were drowned, buried under thresholds, or burned to purify the home. Tablets from Mesopotamia described such children as demons born to mothers of sin. But long before those words were written, the caves had already told the story. For prehistoric humans, disability existed at the crossroads of life and death. It was neither fully human nor fully divine, something in between. A reminder that nature could make mistakes, or that gods could play with flesh. Archaeologists still debate whether early compassion marked the dawn of morality. But perhaps it was something else. The dawn of fear disguised as virtue. Because the bones tell one unbroken truth. They were not left alone. Someone carried them. Someone fed them. Someone touched their skin, whispering words we will never know. And then, someone placed them in the ground with the care of a lover, or the precision of an executioner. Even now, their remains are fragile, soft to the touch, as though the earth itself hesitated to reclaim them. Scientists handle them with gloves, but the silence that surrounds those bones feels heavier than reverence. It feels like guilt. In every cave, in every ancient burial, the same story whispers through the dust, that the people who first learned to love also learned to hurt, that the first act of mercy may have ended with a knife. And perhaps that is what makes us human. Not kindness, not cruelty, but the endless, uneasy space between the two. Every civilization since has inherited that contradiction, building hospitals and prisons, temples and tombs, all born from the same impulse to decide whose suffering matters. The prehistoric, disabled never chose to be symbols. They were born into a world that saw them as messages, warnings written in flesh. To be carried was to be used. To be loved was to be feared. And to be buried with honor was to be remembered as a threat. Their story is not gone. It lives beneath our feet, in bones that still whisper frost, hunger, and ritual fire. The archaeologists who unearth them say the air inside those caves feels different, heavy, expectant, like breath caught in stone. Perhaps that's fitting, because the people who first learned to care also learned what it cost. And when the last torch flickers out in those ancient tombs, what remains is not just the evidence of life, but of judgment, the silent verdict of a species forever torn between compassion and fear. The disabled of prehistory were not forgotten. They were remembered too well. Their pain became our inheritance. Their graves became our conscience. And somewhere, deep beneath the layers of time and silence, their bones still wait, not for discovery, but for understanding.